I'm incredibly competitive to a fault. And I see that in my boys. We'll be out in the cul-de-sac playing wiffle ball baseball recently. And they are just like, this is like World Series level, like importance. They're very into it and just crying, weeping at the end. It's like, guys, this is just like a pickup game, with just your brothers.
Hello and welcome to the Dad Dialogue Podcast, the show where we talk about the successes and the stresses of becoming a dad and being a dad. My name is Laurence. Thank you so much for being with us today. A quick reminder, you can go over to daddialogue.co.uk if you'd like to sign up to be a guest on a future episode. So joining me today is John Dalrymple from the Growing Fathers blog and podcast. If you heard the last episode of Dad Dialogue, you would have heard me interview Kristopher, who is John's co-host on the Growing Fathers podcast. So you might already know a little bit about Growing Fathers, or you might be coming over from their side anyways, and you know a little bit about John. But John is the dad to 6 children. So in our episode, we talk a little bit about the practicalities of that, what life really looks like with 6 kids. We also talk about the decisions that John made in terms of becoming a pastor and, taking on studies and what that looked like in terms of being recently married and welcoming a child into the mix and all those sorts of things, and just like walking life out faithfully alongside being a husband and a father and kind of trying to balance that. We talk about what life now looks like as a pastor and how you kind of balance some of those responsibilities of being responsible for other people, as well as being obviously responsible for your family, and how we're able to balance that. John was able to share a lot of insight and wisdom on that sense. And we also just dive into a little bit about, learning, growing together, learning from other men, learning to become better fathers, and so on and so on. So much for us to get into. So let's get into the conversation. John, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the Dad Dialogue podcast with us. Can you just start off by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself, a bit about your family, kind of how many kids you got and that sort of thing?
Sure, absolutely. The name is John Dalrymple, and I am 34 years old. I'm turning 35 this month, so I had to think about that for a moment. And I grew up on the East Coast, but I now live on the West Coast. Grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. Now I'm in Southern California. Those are 2 very different places, by the way. And a lot of people go the opposite direction, if you know anything about the politics of the United States. But I love Southern California, and this is where God has called us to be, which is why I love being here. There's other reasons too. I love the topography. I love mountains and all that as well. So my story is that I grew up in a Christian home, and parents that really love the Lord, came to know Christ. He's like when I say, like, who am I and what am I? I'm a follower of Christ, number one. I'm also a husband to Suzanne. We've been married now for 11 years or so. And then in those 11 years, we've had 6 children. So we got started right away and haven't really stopped since. It's been one after another. We have 5 boys and then a little baby girl who is the delight of my. I have to be careful about talking about her as being my favorite, but I think my boys already know she's got a special place in my heart. So I know that's a little bit about who I am: a dad, a father. I'm also a pastor. But again, that doesn't take priority. I have to first a follower of Christ. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm a dad, and then I'm a pastor. And I love pastoring. I've pastored now since I came out here into Southern California since 2019. And I love everything about caring for shepherding people and walking them through hard things and through the joys and sorrows of life. So a little bit about me.
Awesome. There's a couple of directions we could go. We could talk about the kids, or I do want to talk about what life was like as a pastor and kind of balancing that. But I do just want to first just dive into the kids, because I had your co-host, Kristopher, on the show last week, and he took the record for the most amount of kids we've ever had on the show. But now you've quickly usurped it from him, because he obviously had 5 children. He held it for a week. And,
that's right.
And you come along and just snatch it up, 6 kids. And what ages are your kids?
Yeah, so my oldest is 10, and then it's you would ask me this. Can I just say the top and the bottom, or do I have to get all them in between? Because they're always changing.
Try your best.
It's 10, and then 8, and then 7, and then 5, and 4, and 2. There, I did it.
No doubles, no twins.
No twins. They're all about 20-ish months apart, something like that.
That is just, I mean, it must be amazing. Like for you, like as a family and stewarding that. But I am really curious just to kind of dive in and like, logistically, like what does that look like? Like how, do you have like a full on like van, like bus that you like cart them around in? How many rooms they have like to kind of like share? Like some of the things that people ask me, because I have two kids who are like 4 and 2 currently. And I've spoken to dads
Boy or
like
girl?
just
Boy and girl, or
two boys.
two boys? Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
And I've spoken to dads that have one, and like, oh, my wife's really thinking about having a second, and what's it like having the second? I just can't even imagine what it's like having the third and fourth and fifth and sixth. Because obviously we look at someone who's done it a little bit differently, and the story is different. So yeah, can you just talk a little bit about like logistically on a day-to-day basis, how do you even cope? Like, what does it look like?
Let me give you a couple thoughts before I even get to the day-to-day, if that's okay. Because
sure.
some people have actually asked, what is the hardest? Is it going from 1 to 2? And maybe somebody listening to this and they're wondering, oh, what is this like? Or is it 2 to 3? What is the challenge? And my wife says that the hardest was actually 0 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
It's from going from this place of it just being the two of you, two adults in the home, to all of a sudden bringing in this child that's completely needy, that doesn't contribute almost anything other than their cuteness to the situation. And so it is really challenging, but it's great. I won't say that adding 2 and 3 and 4 was like, and 5 and 6 was easy, but I think that if I could say like it has gotten easier in some ways once you kind of have a system. And I wouldn't say we're kind of like cheaper by the dozen and what is that, where you like run a tight ship and you have all the systems in place. We're always trying to make that better. But somebody was asking the other day, asking me and a friend of mine who has 9 kids, and he said, is this like, does it get crazier, as you have more kids in terms of like your house and stuff? And I said, actually, it gets more organized. And he's like, how does that work? And I said, it's actually out of necessity. Because you can't just continue going on. I mean, I guess you could, and it would be disastrous. But you have to create some systems and some organization to make it work. And so we're constantly reevaluating, and how can we make things better? And so that's what we'll do. Part of that tonight, when we talk in our, we have a date night tonight, Suzanne and I, and so we'll look forward to talking through how can we make things better as a family. As far as what it looks like in our home, you mentioned vehicle. Yes, my dream vehicle, well, actually, I would love a truck one day, but I have a transit van. So those like the big transport vehicles that like an Amazon vehicle or whatever. At least we have those driving around. One of those big. So it's actually a mid-level. So I'm 6'7". I can't stand up in the van, but my wife can, and it makes things a lot easier when you're putting kids into car seats and stuff like that. But it's a 15 passenger, and we don't have 15. But we take out the entire back row and one other seat. And so it's down to what does that make? 10 seats, but it gives us a lot of space in there for groceries and everything else. And even literally put the stroller up into the back without even taking it down. So that's been a huge game changer. Before that, when we only had like 4 kids or something, I think we had a Toyota Sienna. And I love that. I love that minivan. I do miss it. It drove great, and it was very, very helpful for a family. But yeah, that's the vehicle side of things. You talked about the daily routine and kind of what that looks like. Man, I could talk all day, but I don't know exactly what you want to know.
I'm just trying to imagine it, because I think some of those questions that a dad has when they're kind of welcoming 2 in is like, oh, what do bedtimes look like when I'm trying to manage 2? Because I think I guess a lot of questions of parents come out of the challenges that they're facing with their current child. So if you're having difficulty getting your 18-month-old down, like, and they're not sleeping very well, just your partner saying, I think we should have a second. You're straight away like, well, but he never sleeps. Like, why on earth would we do something like that? So I think those very practical things just kind of come up. So yeah, like in terms of, do you have a giant house? Do they share rooms?
We don't. Well, I guess it depends on what you consider giant. Southern California is ridiculously expensive. Never thought that we would actually be able to own a house, but back in 2020, God was really gracious to us, and we were able to get one with with an interest rate that is like, that makes people really, really jealous. It's ridiculous, but I really think that God provided that for us in a miraculous way. And so we have a house that is currently, it's 2 stories. They turned a loft into a bedroom. And so it's actually 5 bedrooms, but we have 5 boys and then a baby girl. And so we've always like put all the boys in like one room, and then the baby. So back up. All right, hold on. When we were first married, we lived in a basement apartment. It was like a 1-bedroom basement, and it had a living room, and the baby would sleep in our room. And then we had a second kid. It was when we were pregnant with the third kid that we moved out of that 1-bedroom apartment. So we were all really cramped in there, and but we made it work. And you just have to be flexible. So now we have a lot more space, and yet we still don't utilize all that. So one room is actually my office. I have an office at home, and then we have a second room that's like a guest room. And currently our baby girl sleeps in there, and in a little like a pack and play kind of thing. So we don't have a full girls' bedroom, and you don't have to build it all out. I mean, maybe one day she'll get a room, right? And then our boys currently, because we have the 5, back when it was 3, they were all in one room, but currently we have 3 in one room and 2 in another. And the 2 older ones share a room because they end up staying up a little bit later and getting up a little bit. Well, they get up about the same time. They're all allowed to come out of their rooms at 7:00 in the morning. That allows us to have our morning time to do the things that we need to do as a couple, personally, and so they don't get up until 7.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds as though, I think kind of similar to maybe for us, it's just you kind of take what you have at a certain time and just kind of make it work, and it doesn't all have to be set up straight away. I think that was like one of the most surprising things, I guess, as maybe like you can agree or disagree with this, but what I found from my own experience and other dads as well, especially in the pregnancy time, they're just thinking, well, how can I prepare for this child to come? And obviously the mother is working so hard at just growing it and going through pregnancy. So the dad's like, what can I do to kind of shape up and get in gear? And like, all right, I'll read the books. Maybe I'll listen to a podcast. But then it's like, well, what do I need to do to the house? And you think, okay, so yeah, maybe you want to get a few things prepared for the baby, but it doesn't need to be ready for your dream house with 6 kids in them at one time when you're pregnant with your first kid. You kind of like, it's not like a kid comes along and then you can't do anything ever again. You just kind of take it step by step by step. We have friends that would get pregnant. We just kind of tell them, well, as long as they have something to eat and somewhere to sleep and something to wear, it's pretty much all you need to think about.
You're right. Yeah, kids, especially those younger years, it's actually really, we have some of our sweetest memories there in that basement apartment, with almost no space. And I mean, I can still remember like trying to host people in our living room and like, the next bedroom is this little one. And then we're all going into there to sleep. And it was, we had I don't know about in where you live, but like it had a sink in the bedroom too. That's where the sink was, which was just like really odd. It wasn't even in the bathroom. It was kind of a weird basement apartment, but yeah, just great memories. And yeah, you live with what you have. And I think just the wisdom of being, it was more of a priority to be financially wise than to kind of go beyond our means and overextend ourselves to get something that we feel like we need to accommodate our family. So our priorities were in place. And we'll talk later about some of those priorities when it comes to schedule and your evening and your morning and what all you're doing as a family. It's a family of 6, certain things you can't do. And again, I think priorities are really important to nail down so that you can so it's actually all doable with a family of 8.
For sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So we'll kind of loop back into priorities when we kind of talk about your career path. But there is one more thing I'm just curious in terms of just the number of kids. If we just talk about like parenting strategies, like my youngest, for example, he is just pretty crazy at the moment. Like we can talk about the fact that he's 2, so he's a little bit more crazy than the older one, but the older one wasn't this crazy at this point. So we're kind of going through new challenges of what we have to do for this 2-year-old and strategies that we're having to try with him that we maybe didn't have to do with the older one, but the older one was a little bit different in terms of what he had difficulties with. And the thing is like, we're the same parents. their
Yeah.
their upbringing has been mostly the same. So we have also had an international move thrown in there, but like, how do we kind of like reconcile that? And I'm just curious if you've kind of ever had those conversations with people,
Gotcha.
or kind of had to realize those challenges of this person needs this strategy, this person needs this one.
Absolutely. That helps. So I agree with you entirely that each child is uniquely made by God.
Yeah.
And they have their own set of gifts and also, propensities and also struggles. And so we've seen that, wow, with some of our kids, it's like, where did they get that? Well, a lot of it is from parents, right? I can see, for example, I'm incredibly competitive to a fault. And I see that in my boys. We'll be out in the cul-de-sac playing wiffle ball baseball recently, and they are just like, this is like World Series level, like importance. They're very, very into it and just crying, weeping at the end. It's like, guys, this is just like a pickup game, with just your brothers. It's not a big deal. So competitiveness definitely has been transferred from me and not my wife. She is like the opposite of competitive. And then I feel like they all got that in some ways. And then other things will be from nurture. You mentioned the move, and I think that's important for parents to recognize the shaping influence of significant events in their lives. So, for example, my youngest boy is just turned 4, right? Yes, he just turned 4. And so his little sister's just turned 2. And he has the combination of both being the youngest boy and no longer the baby. And with a lot of people showering attention and on this little girl. And so, when I see certain responses and it can be frustrating, and I want to just like, it's important for me to just take a step back and consider the shaping influences in his life. For you, again, it may have been that move that was really a dramatic change. I mean, again, think about the fact that our kids, they don't get to choose they don't make a lot of the decisions, if any. Actually, I think that's actually important to make that point. Our kids do not run the house. If so, we'd be stretched, or we'd be going in all different directions.
Yeah.
There must be leadership. But that means that your kids are often they're going with the flow. All of a sudden they're playing with Legos, and then you're saying, hey, we're going to be out the door. And so, when you have things like a new baby coming into their life, that's going to be really hard for them to cope with. And they don't have some of the maturity of life experience and some of those tools to pull from in order to cope with some of the emotions that they feel. And so I think I've grown, I hope I'm growing in like, what would you call it? Like just sympathy, and empathy, I guess, for my children and where they're at and what they've experienced. And so I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but I think you're right on that. Both the kids are they're made different, but also they're a different place in birth order. I don't know if your experience, birth order is it's hugely significant. And so we talk to a lot of parents that firstborns are very similar in the way that they view life, they approach life, they interact with others. The secondborns, in the way that they observe and the way that they emote, it's fascinating. And so that definitely plays a part, their birth order, and of course other situations that your family goes through that could impact their lives.
I think it's also interesting to look at the difference in the parenting from having a firstborn and secondborn, just in terms of how much time and kind of worry and concern that a new set of parents can give their baby, and maybe to a fault, being overly cautious and concerned and worried.
Yeah.
And then a second comes along and just like, you just don't have time to be that concerned, especially if you're, for like less than 2 years, kind of like yours and mine. You just don't have that capacity because you're still caring for like a 1-year-old or a nearly 2-year-old. And so there's still just lots of emotions going on. So I do find that curious, that just the shift in parenting. I know you said that going from 0 to 1 is definitely obviously the biggest shift, the biggest
shocking,
change.
biggest change.
But the thing I found interesting is going from 0 to 1 is when you get so many offers of help from like colleagues. Oh, we'll cook for you. We'll bring this round. Oh, we'll do this. We'll do that. We'll come help clean. And then you go from 1 to 2 and they're like, cool, congratulations. It's like, now we need the help. We've got like a toddler that we need to look after as well. I find that a little bit curious, but maybe that's not the same experience for everyone.
And then you get to 6 and people are like, "What? Don't expect anything by this point." And you're like, "We need help." But no, and the church comes in a big way. I think the church is the body of Christ, is the hands and feet of Jesus, and our church community. Not just because I'm a pastor, because I see how the church interacts with others. We have a ton of young families in our church, and the way that they care for one another, and then others that don't have, that have grown kids, have come in and just provided food and care for them is remarkable. And I think that that's essential. I don't know how we would have made it without a community of our church family.
Yeah, indeed. So, I mean, that's a nice little segue, I guess, to talking about being a pastor and that kind of pathway. Did you always know that you were kind of going to be a pastor as you were studying?
That's a good question. I didn't. And I'll just share my growing up years as a kid. So my parents were saved as adults and or as young adults. And so they were like, our home is going to be, the Bible is going to be central. They're excited about the church. And so that's what I grew up in. And I came to know Christ at a young age, repented of my sins and turned to Christ for salvation, recognized that I needed him. Not just to make my life better, but because without him, I was destined for separation from him forever. And so, as a young kid, I had a real love for God's word and thought that perhaps, and it may be the influence of my parents and listening to like missionary biographies and other things, I thought that I would be like a missionary one day, go to a foreign land and share the gospel. And actually, I thought I would be, for whatever reason, as a kid, they told me I said I wanted to be a missionary doctor. Wow. And then I realized that I was not good around like blood and all that. Not that you have to do that for a doctor, but that was not my thing. So then I was like, I'm going to be a missionary doctor, a missionary pilot. And then I became 6'7", and I was like, I can't fit in those small planes that go into a jungle. And so I kept changing. But as I got older, I got a college degree, and it wasn't in Bible or anything. It was at a Christian college, but I got a degree, and I wrestled with that. What is the call to pastoral ministry? A lot of guys talked about, I had the call to preach. And it was like, well, don't we all have the call to preach? Like, we're all supposed to preach the gospel, to tell everybody the good news that Jesus is king and he died for our sins. And so, what do you mean the call to preach? Is that what it is? What is a pastor, and what is the call to pastor? The Bible states clearly, Paul talks about he that desires the office of overseer, or we would say a pastor, an elder, desires a good work. And so when I came to the conclusion that I did have that desire to shepherd and to care for the flock of God, then that combined with the gifts that God had given me in terms of communication and then character. So there's the call involves character, and which is stated clearly in Titus and Timothy, talking about what a pastor must be. And then the church itself recognizing the giftedness and saying, we think that you should move into this, because eventually the church is who calls a pastor. And so I pursued seminary training and did that for 4 years after college, and to really know my Bible so that I could preach it. And then a church out here in Southern California actually made that call for me to come and to be one of the pastors here. Okay.
So how does this kind of align with your kind of family journey in terms of when you got married? You've said been married 11 years, 4 years of seminary.
Right. So I was graduated in 2011, married in 2014.
Okay.
Graduated the seminary in 2018, I guess it would be. And then 2019 was here, moved across. And I did seminary actually in Greenville, South Carolina, which is there just a couple hours from Georgia, where I grew up. My wife was from Charlotte, North Carolina. And then we made the trek a couple thousand miles over to Southern California, and I've been pastoring here ever since.
So I'm just kind of curious in terms, we're obviously not an inherently Christian podcast, and there could be dads listening who aren't kind of like have grown up in Christian households. So I'm
Sure.
just kind of curious what that looks like of making that decision with your wife. And so
Mm.
if my maths works out, during your seminary, you would have had your first and maybe second child during seminary.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't put that part in, the
No, it's
family part
okay.
with seminary, but it was it's like we got married in 2014,
Mhm.
and 11 months later we had our first.
Okay.
And so that was right there in the middle of seminary,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really hard. I mean, if you told a person, quick, so I worked in a violin shop, actually. I don't know, or musical. I grew up in a musical family,
Mm-hmm.
and I love music. I play music, but I grew up. I worked after college in a violin shop, and I was doing really well. He wanted me to start like kind of move towards taking over the shop and stuff. It was like a high end instruments, violin, viola, cello, bass,
Mm-hmm.
and but instead, as God was working in my heart towards pastoral ministry, actually, I remember that conversation. I like quit my job. I said, I'm done here. I'm moving on to seminary. And then that was right before getting married and starting seminary.
Okay.
And so the combination of those three things is not financially wise advice. I wouldn't necessarily encourage anyone to do that and have a kid 11 months later.
Yeah.
I mean, financially, that's just reckless.
Mm-hmm.
But it was God's plan, and obviously had people around me that were encouraging me to follow the Lord in that way. And God provided every step of the way. And I could tell you stories about God's provision. Really, really cool. But yeah, that was really challenging years, those first few years, because there was times where I was getting, 4.5, 5 hours of sleep at night, working to study Greek and Hebrew and taking these different classes. And then my wife has these little kids. And it was definitely challenging. A lot of growth happened, and but a lot of it was not always easy. My wife would tell you that as well.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just kind of curious. So you mentioned, I think it'd be kind of great to hear some of these stories of provision, because I think men are wired to obviously want to provide, and I think a very common worldview is like, oh, that just means financially, but it's not just that. I think you and I both know that there's so much providing that happens in a household by the father. It can be financially, like that is a big part of it if you decide to do that within your family. So I'm just curious, kind of how that provision comes through, because these 4 years of seminary, it must have been tough on time, tough on finances. So was there ever any doubt in terms of that choice, or did God's provision just kind of override?
Yeah, I love that. You're calling attention to the provision as extending beyond financial. He provided like remarkable strength, and through that time, I look back, and sometimes, have you ever done this where you look back and you're like, how did I survive through that season of life? I don't really know. And so I think God provided again, I'm going back to like that church family, that community that was there in Greenville. They were so supportive. I mean, literally, we came to that church. I remember I started seminary, and we were just found out we were having a baby. We came to this church, and they were like, they had a baby shower for us before, for our first kid there, before they even really knew us well. It was remarkable. So God provided community for us. God did provide housing. That's an important thing. We got that basement apartment. And, at this point, again, I had quit my job. I'm kind of living off of savings doing seminary. And if you know anything about renting, the rental prices don't go down.
Nope.
But in this case, they had said that part of our payment could be through doing like yard work for the house, as well as house cleaning. And so as a result, after renting for a few months, they lowered our rent by like $100. And then they lowered it again a little bit later, because they were just really thankful for us, and we were doing a good job. So it ended up, and again, this is back in 2000, 15, 16, we're paying like something like $200 a month for rent. Which, just to give some comparison, and I know this is a number of years later, but here in Southern California right now, you'd be good to get some small like 2-bedroom kind of thing for like, I don't know, $2,000 or something. So it's just crazy. But that was a really amazing provision by God, right? Just as housing, and then finances along the way too, as I worked through the summer, some to pay for schooling. So yeah, God's provision in different ways. You asked, was there ever a moment of wondering, are we doing the right thing? I don't think so. Like we had confirmation. There was just moments where I really had to assess, how am I doing as a dad, as a husband? Because I had worked hard and saved really diligently for a number of years before getting married, I was able to live off of that savings and the generosity of, there was parents, friends helping me with schooling. And so yes, I did schooling like nonstop, but I did spend time with my family, whenever I wasn't doing schooling and I wasn't serving in the church or hosting other friends. And so we, while it was really a busy season, I think that when it comes back to priorities, you can't neglect, right? First of all, your relationship with God, that spiritual connection that really stabilizes you as a parent, as a husband. And then you give priority to your marriage. Because let's face it, if your marriage is falling apart, your parenting is going to suffer the same result. Like your kids are going to feel that, even if they're very small. And so you have to care for the marriage. And I wasn't perfect in that during the younger years. I didn't, I think sometimes you even enter marriage, you're like, I know what this is like. I figured out this person, and I know, but you have to continue to grow to understand who they are, and they're changing just like you're changing all the time. And so, our marriage is a lot stronger now after 11 years than it was after 1 year. And I praise God for that, and that's been a journey.
Amen. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny trying to talk to people who are not married, and they kind of will come to some those sorts of things like, oh yeah, once I'm married, then fill in the blank, and they kind of like, oh, easy life. It's like, oh, okay. At some point, I think I did think that was, oh yeah, pre-marriage counseling. Like we did long distance dating before we got married. When we get married, we're going to finally live in the same country, the same place. It'll be easy. And then like that first year of marriage, like, bam, you're like, oh geez, what is this? And you're so right. Like that priority just has to be there. And it's a bit of a wake-up call, obviously. And I think it's really interesting that you've mentioned just how hard you worked to kind of get some savings before getting married. It's a bit of a side note, we don't need to go down to it, but I've just been seeing a lot of comments, I guess, of the current, like, I've heard people call it like Sabbath culture, and overly reliant on like unplugging and like de-stressing and this, that, and the other. Kind of like the generation below us, I think, is kind of what I've seen online, at least. Like people are so desensitized to the world of like corporations this, corporations that. Therefore, why would I like work hard for anything? But I think that fact of like you've worked hard before getting married and you get to reap what you've sown as a family man, I think is just absolutely a real inspiring story. And I hope someone can kind of take something from that. I'm curious now, if we fast forward to as a pastor now, emotionally, you'll take on the needs of many. You said that you would enjoy the idea of shepherding people. So you must have a lot of people that on your mind, that you pray for, that come to mind and you're journaling, and maybe you're writing about them, whatever it might be. How do you kind of switch that off and just be like happy dad at the end of the day? Or is there ever any tension in that?
That's a great question, Laurence. That's really hard. I think some people do this better than others. Some pastors do this better than others. They're able to compartmentalize really well. A pastor doesn't get to leave his job at the office. So he takes it with him. I don't know. I'm sure there are other jobs like this too. Where like, I mean, like I'm not comparing it to a president, but I'm just thinking like a president doesn't really ever stop being a president. Like everywhere he walks, that is who he is. And a pastor is not just, are we all always on call, but also like, you feel that, that, okay, someone's going in for surgery tonight, or this is really hard, or just different things that you hear. And so, a couple things, I mean, it's heavy for me. Um, I, I don't know that there's any like perfect, strategy in terms of how to compartmentalize. And I don't know that I do that really well. One thing I will say that I try to not like dump everything on my wife. And she actually knows surprisingly little about the some of the heaviest parts of ministry. And I do that to protect her. And I think that, regardless of what, guys that may be listening to this are in the middle of, you need to communicate well with your wife, but you have to be careful, what you're sharing. You don't want to really burden them down with something, that is not theirs to carry. So it takes a lot of discernment and wisdom, which is what I'm just pleading with God for every day. God, how do I do this? But yeah, I do like to really engage with my kids and as much as possible, switch things off or just enter their world. So this morning, my wife, I just had a few minutes before leaving, and she was trying to do some reading lessons with one of the boys. She homeschools all the kids.
Wow.
So that's like, I mean, it's hard enough to have 6, but then to homeschool them is like completely different level.
Yeah.
And at this point, they're all like elementary age, and so she's like heavily involved. At some point, they're high school, they're going to be doing a lot more by themselves. But it's kind of wild. But anyway,
instead of 2-year-old like running around, right? Like
yeah, and so we could talk more about that. I'm still not sure how that's all happening. She's really the one you should have on here, because she's making it happen. She's an incredible woman. But yeah, to the point of like entering your kid's world, I was just there with my daughter. She just really wanted to swing. She loves to swing, and go swing me high, daddy. And so I went out there and just trying to like not pull my phone out, not check everything that's going on or that's coming up, but just swing her and look into her eyes and laugh with her and talk to her. And that's an important thing to be able to do, to shut it on and shut it off when it comes to the business or in my case, ministry, and enter the life of my little child.
That's awesome. I remember I was on one of the episodes of Growing Fathers. We'll mention it a little bit later, but I assume it's like one of your highlights. But I think you had mentioned something about getting an Apple Watch. So then you know that at least if a notification comes through or someone's trying to call you, you can just like be connected but less prone to get your phone out. And I think like I've always had one, and I just think that's a really practical thing to do, because I mean it's just crazy like how subliminally addicted we all are to our phones. At least I know I am. And it just kind of sneaks in. And like for me, I try to have my Bible and like a few books and my notepad like next to my chair in the living room. So if the boys are kind of playing and just getting on with what they're doing, I always try and sit there. So if I'm like, oh, I can kind of be like writing or reading, I'm going to do that there. So I'm not like, if I sit somewhere else, I don't have those things. I'm just going to start like flicking through my phone or whatever. And I just think those tiny little things that we like try and like put in are so important to try and, as you said, like remain either like in that, like getting into that world, obviously, but then like a little bit adjacent to their world so that we can easily jump in, because we never want to be that dad. It's like, oh, I don't like, dad doesn't want to come and do Lego with me because of phone or whatever it might be. Jesus talks, interruptibility is a really big thing that I've always kind of like studied and prayed about, the amount of times that Jesus was interrupted in his ministry. Like, of me as a dad, like I need to be interruptible for my kids.
I love that. Interruptibility. I think that's a really good word.
Yeah. Gosh, it's not easy though.
No, it's not. And we'll get in our like, what we need to do in our plans, but what does God want for this day, right? So I drop on my knees every morning and I just commit my day and my time to him, because he may have very different plans than I have for the day. And I want to be able to be like guided by his hand instead of just set in my tracks. And when it comes to kids, it's going to be different than what you maybe envisioned. And I can guarantee you things are not going to go exactly as planned. And that's okay. The question is, how are you going to respond to it?
Exactly. I think it's really interesting. Like, I think I was listening to one of your guys' episodes and referencing back. I know it was an interview that you had done with another ministry about praying the Lord's Prayer as a model. And I've heard one of the prayer things I follow, they say that the Lord's Prayer helps us. The first half is for like to invite God into our life, and then for us to kind of get in on his life, on his world. And it's just that really powerful, or the other way around. Basically, the Lord's Prayer is just for us to
his kingdom first, right? Then it comes to our needs and our temptations, and so that priority of what is he up to with this day. I don't know if you're a planner. A lot of guys they like to have everything and like lined up, and I think to some degree I'm a planner. I like to have to know what's expected, what's coming up, and I don't know. The reality is you don't know what a day will bring.
Yeah.
And so we need that recognition that like, okay, I'm, just that like daily dependence and moment by moment dependence on him.
Yeah.
So it's good.
That's awesome. No, thanks for sharing. So we've alluded to the Growing Fathers a couple of times. I don't know if I've actually name dropped it, but this is a blog that you started a while ago, and now a podcast as well. I wanted just to quickly ask you, I know in the podcast, you and your co-host Kristopher will share highlights and lowlights at the start of the episode, but each of you will share something that's either been positive about your parenting or maybe a more kind of like humbling moment, let's say, of a parenting journey.
Yeah.
I'm really curious in terms of how you engage with other people's stories of parenting, such as like listening to a dad podcast. How do you kind of process it, and what do you think it does for you in your parenting to hear other people share about their parenting?
It is eye-opening. I think it's encouraging. It can be, it can also lead to comparison when you say, oh man, I'm not doing it like they're doing it. And I think that's just really unfair. And so, we do include lowlights as well as highlights. We want to be real on the Growing Fathers podcast. The name implies the fact that we haven't arrived. Laurence, if I can be real honest with you, starting that podcast was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I wrestled with it for years. Because initially we started the blog in 2020. And at the very beginning, I was going with this idea with a friend of mine. It's kind of funny. We were thinking about starting this 2020. So I was like, I had like a 4-year-old or 5-year-old or something. I knew nothing, right? In reality about parenting, I was just learning, but I wanted to be intentional about that and continue to grow and share what I was learning. And I thought we would do that in a podcast format. And I'm glad I didn't start a podcast back then. We just started the blog and just started writing, and then got other guys to join on. And so over the course of, since 2020, do the math, because I'm not going to be able to do that. But yeah, it's been hundreds and hundreds of articles, one every week for the last 5 years. And so, but starting the podcast was back in April, that actually got launched. And that's very humbling to go on and to start sharing things, because you're still so much in the place of learning and growing. But I'm really encouraged to hear from others. I can learn from them and grow, and try to not compare, because everybody's situation is completely different. So I think what you're doing is great.
Thank you.
You can pick things out from the experience of other dads and be like, wow, I haven't thought about it that way. Or their approach is completely different. And maybe that's like, oh, I don't want to do that. Or maybe it's like, that's really helpful way to think about it. And so, I
appreciate it.
I think it's great.
I think for me, at least personally, I just, when things come up in parenting, it's curious kind of like what voices are knocking around in your head. I think you're guest number 42 or 41, because one person's done twice. There'll be times that I'll be like having an interaction with my son, and this reminds me of that time I spoke to, and then I don't even remember their name. Like, their picture will come up, but I'm terrible with names, and I'll have to kind of like really think about it. But this person told me about this story, and I think that is like a useful thing for now. And I think that aspect of life is like really useful, and I think kind of like more studied literature in terms of parenting is useful. And then obviously above all of that, like we put the scriptures in
Uh-huh.
terms of what roots us in God's word. But I think all these other stuff can really benefit us, because the last thing we want
Mm-hmm.
is to just kind of be having a really difficult moment with a child and just like, I'll just go blank. And it's like, oh,
Right.
scriptures coming to mind would be great. Maybe something I read in a parenting book would be great, but also, I know John from Growing Fathers shared the story about how this happened one time, and I can learn from that in this situation. So, I would definitely recommend anyone who's got this far to the episode to definitely go and check out Growing Fathers blog and podcast. Of course, all the links will be in the description.
Can I share one thing, just playing off what you just shared, and that is that we do need to be listening. We need to be learning from others. And like you mentioned books, you mentioned, podcasts like this that can get you thinking, being intentional as a dad. And I think that's great. Part of our mission there at Growing Fathers, built into that purpose statement, is to help dads grow to be more like Jesus and apply the Bible to parenting for the strengthening of families and churches to the glory of God. And so we recognize the role of the church. I'll keep coming back to this. You can see that theme. But so for example, right after this, let's see, in about 30 minutes, I have a meeting with a young dad from our church, and we'll be talking through parenting, some of our personal struggles. We pray together, and that's really vital. If dads are listening to this and they don't have those kind of like personal connections, not just where you're getting tips and really good parenting advice, solid advice from professionals, but you need the embodied relationship with with another human being. In my case, another follower of Christ who has the same kind of values and direction. And you can walk alongside, you walk through parenting with them. Obviously, your wife, that's going to be central, right? But in addition to that, another man who can understand some of the real challenges that you face as a dad. I think that's really, really important thing. So I hope that people that listen to our Growing Fathers podcast are then going back. We want to encourage them to go back to their church and to them to be strengthened as dads and as husbands and as fathers for the benefit of their church family, to connect there and help other men to grow.
Yeah, amen. I think it's really important also the context as well, because you and Kristopher might be sharing about your context where you guys are based. The blogs might be from the context of whoever is writing it, and I think that context is often very, could be very valuable. But then at the end of the day, my context will look very different to you, like in terms of my day-to-day and challenges I might have just based on where I live and different things like this. So I think, I definitely agree that finding those relationships are super, super vital. I'm reminded of an episode I had on, his name was his grandfather. He was a former mentor of mine. His name was Darcy. He told me that I basically asked him, like, what's the main difference between parenting when you first had your kids and now grandparenting? Because he had like five grandkids in the space of like 3 years or something. It was ridiculous. Wow. And he basically said that the trap that so many people fall into, that he saw as like a pastor as well as within family life, was that people want to build the faux village. He called it like a fake village of YouTube or Instagram or social media or podcasts. Like, not to say that they're inherently bad, but they offer value. However, it's not a true village that's actually going to support you in real times of trouble. You need people around you that are able to do that. And I'd like to think that, Growing Fathers, or even here at the Dad Dialogue, that if someone were to reach out to us, we would offer them support. But at the end of the day, we're always going to say you need to connect to someone local to you to actually offer you real support if it's something serious. So no, I appreciate you adding that on for us, John. So final question we always wrap up our episodes with is, if you could think back to before you became a dad for the very first time, so a little bit over 10 years ago, I guess, do you think there's any advice that John could have heard back then before becoming a dad for the very first time?
Oh, that's a good one. Let's see. Parenting is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but it is one of the most rewarding things that you'll ever do. So savor every moment and stay on your knees.
Yeah.
Too often I have just tried to figure things out instead of really going to God for wisdom. And let's just face it, this is way bigger than us as dads. We're shaping another human's life.
Yeah.
The first few years of life, not trying to scare anybody, but like they are so formative and in a person's existence. And so you need something outside of you that's going to help you. And I think that's the creator of the universe and also the creator of that child. We try to remind people at the Growing Fathers podcast that the children at the end of the day, they're not yours. You have them on borrowed time. And oftentimes it's around 18 years, give or take. And in the space, if God to give you, 70, 80 years, that's actually a really short snippet. And yet it's such a valuable little portion there of life. And so, viewing your role as a steward of someone else's child really shapes the way that you think of that. So just step back. If you think about somebody gives you a car to use or something, you're like, as opposed to your own car. Like, I don't know about you, but like this morning, I'm literally driving here and said hi to a neighbor and she had these huge dogs. They run up and they try to jump up to say hi and they scratch the side of my car.
Oh my God.
And you know what? It's not a big deal. Why? Because I have 6 kids and they ride scooters next to my car and scratches it. It's not a big deal. It's stuff. If that car was somebody else's, I would treat that very differently. Think about that. In the same way, if you view your kids as yours, you're going to you could tend to almost see them as serving your needs. And not just like, hey, go grab me, my slippers. But almost validating your sense of control, do this, do that. I think some dads just love that sense of maybe they don't get it at work. They're more of an employee. And so they're getting told to do things. They go home and they're the boss or they think they are, I'm going to tell everybody what to do. And that is just not the way to view that. We're a steward of God's gift of children. And so when we view it like that, it changes the way that we think about parenting. And now we're like, God, what do you want to do here? How do you want this kid? Where do you want this kid to end up? A couple of my kids are really gifted with one of my kids is really gifted with programming and all things computer, and math and stuff. He's just incredible. Another is has a great gift in terms of athletics and sports. And I want to be careful about projecting my plans onto my kid. I love sports. So I'd be like, hey, this kid is going to go on and he's going to be a professional baseball player, whatever. But I have to step back and say, what does God want for this child? Remember, it's not mine. And too often we see parents that project their plans and their wishes and their desires onto the kid instead of really saying, God, what is best for this child? And so that was a long answer, but I guess it would be good. Just to remember to keep growing, to stay on your knees, and then remember that they're not mine ultimately.
No, that's really profound. Thanks for sharing. There's a thing that just comes to mind very quickly. A scripture in Ephesians 6 where we'd say children submit to your parents, and I heard a teaching on that once, and it really shifted my parenting because I wouldn't say that I fell into this category, but there are going to be some parents out there who are if the Bible says that you should submit to me, that you should obey me, it says children submit to your parents. But I heard this teaching that was more kind of no, you listening to this teaching, you understand my words. So God's talking to you to obey your parent, the dad that left you, or your parents that had a divorce, or your dad that, in my case, that passed away, and you still need to submit to that, and the stepmother that ruined lots of parts of my family. You as a grown adult need to submit to that person before you can, truly foster and steward your kids well. And that was really challenging for me because one of the kids' Bible books has that as the verse to try and learn children obey your parents.
Yeah.
But yeah, that just really spoke to me. Like, I think we can use it with our children, obviously, but the bigger picture of what God's trying to say in that section really kind of spoke to me. I know that just for some reason just come to mind as you were sharing.
Let me just read that verse because it's important to see the second part of that verse. Some people could say, "Oh, that's so like absolutist. Like, children obey. Like, you're just supposed to be robots, just do everything that they say." But the verse says, Ephesians 6:1 says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." So to go off of that idea of that they're not just your kids, if children are supposed to obey parents in the Lord, then they're recognizing that He is the ultimate authority. And so in the same way, later it's going to be, I know that, or just a little bit earlier, it talks about wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands. I get that's really radical, and that's really hard in our day and age, right? But the next phrase says what? Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. So it's not as much that He's the ultimate authority, it's that God is. Now that reshapes the way that you view the relationship all of a sudden. The husband is actually just like this, he's put in this position of responsibility and as to protect and to provide and all those things, same thing that would be for a child, right? A parent is placed in the life to protect, to provide, to guide, and children are supposed to obey them in the Lord. And so when you see that role as not the ultimate authority, and there's one above who is God, it also makes really hard for the parent. Now, I mean, not hard, but like humbling, because it's not just what I say. I'm actually a representative of the King of all creation. Yeah. And so if I'm telling you to do something that's actually wrong, and we tell our kids this all the time, if dad or mom tell you to do something that's wrong, immoral, you disobey us all the time. You can disobey us, absolutely, because ultimately they have a higher authority, and that is God.
Amen. Well, that's a pretty strong foot to leave it. So I think we'll wrap up there. John, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the Dad Dialogue podcast with us.
Laurence, it's been a delight.
And there we have another Dad Dialogue conversation. Of course, a massive thank you goes out to John for coming on the show and sharing his stories with us. It was super interesting for me talking to John, who has 6 children. Just made me realize what practically it really looks like of having such a big family. And it was really awesome to hear his stories from having such a big family, what life really looks like. I appreciated John's honesty in terms of pastoring and what that entails with having that big family and kind of that knock-on effect. And I think we really touched on a few interesting topics. So yeah, if you have anything that you would like to communicate, any comments, please do reach out to me, and we can follow up. If you have any questions, daddialoguepodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to reach out, you can do it over there. I hope you appreciate that little bit of bonus teaching from the Bible, diving into Ephesians 5 and 6, a little bit into that little section at the end. I thought that was very, very pertinent for what we were talking about in terms of being dads to children. I think it's just so important to root it in Scripture when we can. So yeah, really, really appreciative to John. If you'd like to hear more of John, do go over to the Growing Fathers website if you'd like to read some more. I will put links for the website as well as links to the podcast. I really recommend going and checking out the podcast. If you like that dialogue, I'm sure you'll like Growing Fathers as well. So do go over there and check that out. Thank you so much for watching or listening today. I hope you have a great day, and I hope to talk to you again soon. Goodbye.